Welcome to another episode of The Shift with Elena Agar. In this episode, I speak with Arjan Peters. He is an entrepreneur and a fellow podcaster. He hosts a podcast called R4E, which stands for Reason for Everything. And in this episode together, we really talk about what is the reason for everything and the learnings that he got away from his guests, and really just hearing from him about his career story and the challenges, the ups and downs, and the future aspirations that he has. So if you are interested in podcasting or wondering, is there really a reason for everything in this life? Listen to this episode. Arjan, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Elena, I'm excited to be here and really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. You and I both, of course, met because you are also a podcaster and you have a beautiful podcast that's called The Reason for Everything. So I want to kick this conversation off with that and tell me a little bit more, because it's very different from your day job and from the industry that you're in. So why The Reason for Everything? What inspired you to start that?
No, it's so spot on. It's almost counterintuitive to the world of high finance consulting and just very different. And a lot of times you hear someone say reason for everything, it almost sounds a little fluffy, a little pie in the sky, and not really much punch there. But and especially in the industry that I'm working in, to your point, you don't really hear things like that very often. But I've always had the strong faith and belief that there is really a reason for everything, and we can dive into that more here in a few minutes. But I've always had that belief. And then over the last couple of years, as podcasting has really gained popularity, I've always thought and wanted to get a podcast started. And then I know we talked about this on our episode together on my podcast, but as I kind of dove into the journey of self-development and self-help books and reading and podcasts and so forth, I started to really get an understanding of meditation and mantras. And one of the mantras that I always stuck to as I was starting in my meditative journey was, as I took a breath in, I would think there's a reason for everything. And as I would breathe out, I would think everything happens for a reason. And that was truly how I initially started getting that kind of top of mind, the idea that there's a reason for everything. And that was about a year and a half ago now, almost 2 years ago. And then long-winded way of saying, back in January, I finally decided to go and buy this microphone at Best Buy and start recording from there. So long-winded way of saying, it is a kind of orthodox path, if you will, of going and buying a microphone and starting the podcast. But as we talked about before we started airing, a different journey to get there.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan, obviously, of not only the topic for your podcast, which is the reason, because I live by that, and we're going to dive into it in just a minute from your perspective. But I think podcasting is so much more than just, it's just so much more. Like, for example, I've learned how to be a better communicator, a better listener, more empathetic. So, and I feel like it's just, you become just better as a human because you hear other people's stories. And before we start recording, I was saying stories do matter of everyone. I feel like everybody has a unique story. So tell me the story of why is it that you decided to go into personal development? Usually it requires some kind of shift or something that has happened in life, or a realization that you're like, okay, I really want to now invest into this pathway of personal development and meditation.
Yeah, I, as probably many people in my kind of age demographic could resonate with, it was right after the pandemic was really kind of wrapping up. Everyone had gotten, for the most part, vaccinated and things were opening back up. And it was that summer, I guess it was summer of 2021, where maybe it's, people say that men's frontal cortex doesn't fully develop until they're 25. And that was right after I turned 25. And I started to start to think about things differently and see the world differently. I think it was probably a little bit of the post-pandemic kind of seeing the real world for the first time as
science somewhere in there, and the brain science.
Exactly. So I think it was a combination of that. And so I bought the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, which I've spoken about on many of my podcast episodes. And that was really the first book or idea in this whole, self-development, self-help journey that got me interested in that space. And from there, I just went down this massive rabbit hole of all of the books and audiobooks in that section, that realm, and tapped into different podcasts that talked about the same sort of things. And it's just hooked my attention ever since. And after thinking about it and having conversations about it, I can't get enough of it. So that was really kind of what kicked it off for me, and really haven't looked back since.
You know what's interesting you say about the 25, because I talked to a lot of people, and even when I was telling you when I was on your podcast, there is something around growing up right? There is something that at some point, and it's really interesting. Why is it? It's like, you know, when people try to get ahead of the curve, but it's like no matter what you do, there's just certain, like, sure, there's some people that just have different experiences and they mature a little bit earlier and whatever may be. And usually those experiences are not the pleasant ones, right? Unfortunately, but it's pretty standard that, you know, through, you know, like they always say, like teenage years, early 20s, we're just kind of trying to figure it out. And I think after 25, and then you have like a couple of pivots, it seems like, as you get older. I'm 37 now, and I feel like every, you know, every like couple of years, 30 few years, I kind of go through a different like evolution, or I don't know, elevation, whatever you want to call it. So it's pretty interesting that you say 25, because I hear that a lot. I wonder what it is. Have you thought about it? Like, what is it? I mean, for you was the pandemic, but was there anything else that you felt like who you were before 25 and after 25?
Yeah,
Like
it's funny you
change?
say that. I was just thinking about this and having a conversation about this the other day. Now I'm 26 years old now, and I really think, for me at least, and I think this is probably rings true for other people my age. I think about time almost in 4-year increments now, not intentionally, but I think it's because of how the American school system is butchered out. So you had 4 years of high school, 4 years of undergrad, and then as I turned 26, I'm wrapping up 4 years post a traditional undergrad experience. So for me, in my head, it's almost like these buckets of different experiences and different time frames, where it's almost like, hey, I've had another almost 4 years to get another quote unquote degree, but that degree is just real life. Now, I think that the pandemic really kind of adjusted those timelines, or metaphorical timelines, if you will. But that's the only thing that I can chalk it up to for me, at least in terms of why then. But you know, I think it's a combination of both. I think, again, after that, at 25, a lot of people have had a little bit of time to maybe move away from home, to get a couple of years under their belt in their at the start of their career, and are starting to probably have some real life experience, as opposed to the kind of sheltered space that you have in high school and undergrad. So maybe that's what it is, but
Yeah, maybe
my
that's
guess
what
is
it
as
is.
good as anyone's, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious, you know, because like everybody, yeah, like it seems to be like a pretty normal thing, but I'm just curious, like, how do we, for me, honestly, it was like, yeah, 25, but then probably like more into like 30s. But anyway, it's just interesting. But I'm curious, what did you study in college?
Yeah, I studied finance at Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech. Yeah, I was gonna say you're Hokies, right?
You got it.
Hokies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Hokie.
yeah, Hokie. Yeah. And so did you always like finance? Because you told me, like, I think when we were talked last time, you're like I feel like it's a hobby for me. Like, do you feel like your work is kind of like something you're really passionate about?
Yeah. I mean, I really do truly love my work today. I didn't ever really think that I wanted to be in finance when I was a kid. I never grew up wanting to be in this type of role, or being market facing, or being in any sort of finance role. But really, when I was a kid, so I've had really bad food allergies my whole life. And when I was a kid, I always thought that I wanted to be an allergist or some sort of physician to help figure out and serve those that have food allergies as well. And as you know, when you're 17, 18 years old applying for undergrad, and you're going through the application processes, it's not really that much of a crazy decision in terms of picking your major. It's, you could pick the pre-med routes, whatever that is, at different schools, or finance. And as a 17-year-old, when I was filling out my college applications, the idea of sitting in school for another 10 plus years, going through a traditional medical school program, just really wasn't appetizing for me at the time. So I figured, oh, well, the logic, at least that I walked through in my head, was if I go into business or finance, I can go and maybe help a lot of other people that way by being philanthropic and giving back to the organizations or communities that are helping to advance food allergy research, which ends up coming kind of full circle in my story down the line. But that was the kind of logic that I led in my head back when I was 17, which is nothing more than a little bit of luck to get me into a job that I actually really love today. But you know, there was no kind of crazy grand plan to get into the job that I have today.
Yeah, kudos to you for knowing at 17 that there's a different route you could take.
I truly feel fortunate. I mean, there's so many people that go and they're in their X year of residency and they realize, hey, I don't really want to be doing this for the long haul. So I think I lucked out in that way. I think I would have been perfectly happy as a physician of sorts as well, but I definitely would not enjoy being in school still to this day.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. What do you enjoy the most about the work that you do today? Like, what are the things that you really enjoy, you feel like fulfilling for you? Or maybe it's just you make great money. Like, there's nothing wrong with that either, obviously, but
yeah. I mean, this is the first true sales role that I've been in. And you know, the incentive structure is really aligned in how I really operate, and how I'm, one, intrinsically motivated to put my best foot forward and do my best for the kind of internal facing exposure that I get on a day-to-day basis. But also I want to put my best foot forward to the markets that I'm serving as well. And what's really interesting to me, and probably you resonate with this as well as a podcaster, I love talking to people. I love hearing about people's stories, what their problems are, how they kind of maneuvered their way through different situations. And that's really what I get to do on a day-to-day basis, and I get paid for it. And I feel super fortunate that I found my role at Capstone, and I work with a great team. And like I said, I really love my job. And that's not just me talking my book. I truly tell it to anyone that I speak with, that I really do like and love what I do every day, and love going to the office and talking to my colleagues. But I really enjoy the client management aspect of it, and being able to build relationships with people. I like going and meeting people in person and getting face to face. The Zoom calls are really efficient, and they were a great alternative during the pandemic, but it's really nice to get face to face with people and really build those relationships. So again, long-winded way of saying, I think the best part about it and what I really like is just being able to talk to people and build a relationship and get paid to do it.
And through podcasting, you're actually learning the psychology of people. Just the more people you talk to, the more you get to know humans. And that is one of the biggest skills you need to have in sales. So it's like a life hack for you. Like you're doing professional development, so to say, by talking to many people, and you know what I mean? Like, because that's sales, right? Like to understand, what do people mean? How to ask good questions, right? Trying to uncover something that's, that's there, so it's trying to get to the bottom of a topic or a question. So it's a skill that literally translates to to what you can do at work. So that's excellent.
Absolutely. The only caveat is sometimes after a full day of Zoom calls and then podcasting in the evenings, the blue light really does wane on you after a little bit. That's the only glass half empty, I guess, view that I would give, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you with that. So you've had quite a number of guests on your podcast since you started. So have you seen any themes that have come out, around this topic of, there's a reason for everything?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the fascinating thing for me in interviewing, I've interviewed U.S. ambassadors and best-selling authors and scientists and researchers and entrepreneurs, and the common thread that keeps popping out is that nobody really knows what they're doing or where they're going. They just show up every single day, put their best foot forward, and obviously hindsight's 2020, and they can say they zigged when they should have zagged or whatnot, but it's really interesting to hear and see these really successful individuals or people that are early on in their what is going to be a path to significant success, and saying they really don't know what they're doing. They're just showing up, putting the work in, putting the time in, and hoping for the best. And that bit of hope and that bit of faith that seems like every guest that I've had, including yourself, has to take that leap of faith, seems to be the common thread, is willing to take a bet on themselves and take that calculated risk.
Have you had anybody who was like skeptical around the fact, somebody, because a lot of people are skeptical, like, as you said, sometimes it might sound to somebody like, oh, like it's more of a, like, what is the word? Like this woo thing, like, this mystical thing, like there's a reason for everything. Have you had any skeptics?
Yeah. My fourth episode with a close friend, Austin Tatum, he brought up a TED talk with this one researcher who was trying to debunk the idea that everything happens for a reason. And her whole concept and premise was around, you have to give yourself a sense of agency in any decision that you're making. And we talked about that, and we had a little bit of banter and dialogue back and forth about that. But that was the only really time where someone maybe brought up a counterpoint to the idea of it. But in reality, having a sense of agency is a huge component of, in my eyes, of everything happens for a reason as well. When I say that, it's not just the idea of, oh, you have to, let go of the steering wheel. You have to, completely give up. That's not what I'm saying at all when I preach my mantra of everything happens for a reason for everything. On the other hand, it's this idea of surrender and not trying as hard and really just kind of going with the flow in whatever direction that is. So instead of letting go of the metaphorical steering wheel, it's just holding onto it a little less tight, not white knuckling that steering wheel. That is the car of life or whatever you say there. So that's how I think about it. And that's the conversation that I had with Austin in that episode is, you still have to have a sense of agency. You still have to be the one that's making the decisions in your life, but there's only so much you can do on a given basis. There are a lot of factors that are out of your control. And so you have to put your best foot forward for the decisions that are in your control. So,
yeah. No, I mean, I love that. And it's, I do agree that you need to feel like you have some sort of control, but I think it's when I think about the reason for everything, I would almost think about, flexibility, being flexible, being agile, right? Like I always say, like we apply agile methodology in so many different industries, but we need to apply that a little bit with our lives too, like experimentation and just being a little bit more flexible with how we approach. And I guess I wonder if there's a spiritual aspect to some people, because it's like it gives you, when bad things do happen, at least it gives you, it's almost like it helps you manage whatever situation you're in, belief that it's there for a reason, right? Like have you had any guests who maybe tied it in with like some kind of spiritual thing? Because I imagine it's very difficult there are certain things that are, life changing that happen that are really hard for people. And I think it helps having a mindset like believing that there's a reason for why this happened versus not, because that can go dark very quickly.
It's spot on. And the kind of point of I guess not even criticism, but the feedback that I got when I was initially coming up with the idea for the show and the name, one of the people in my kitchen cabinet of friends and advisors pointed out, but what about when X tragedy happens? How can you tell someone, hey, there's a reason for everything? And it's so challenging. And obviously I don't have an answer for why certain tragedies happen, but I think that to your point, the reason for everything, or having faith or belief in the universe, a higher power, your God, my God, whatever you want to call it, I think having that blind faith allows that painful moment, whatever it is, whether it's the worst of worst tragedies or just a little inconvenience in your day. Like today, I spilled my entire cup of coffee on my white button down. Whatever it is, if you can just chalk it up to, hey, there's a reason for everything, or hey, I have faith in the higher power, like I said, I think having that beacon of hope in the back of your head is really the way you can, to your point, rationalize and have a little bit of serenity in the challenging times, again, as severe of a challenge or as something as minor as spilling coffee on yourself.
How do you, I guess, what are you doing today for personal development? How do you stay, like, what's your next, because there's levels to it, right? So what are you working on today?
Yeah, I continue to try to level up my meditation game. It's, it ebbs and flows. It's just like any component of a habit or routine. I don't do it every day, admittedly, but it's something that I want to continue to grow on and get better on. And there's obviously, to your point, levels to each of these kind of realms of self-development. I just got into the sauna game, and that's been a game changer for me.
I love
haven't
sauna.
gotten into cold plunge yet. That's all the kind of surface level, traditional mindset, motivation, ideas that are out there to kind of advance self. But I'm hoping and planning to just continue to live out the things that I'm reading and preaching on my episodes and in my conversations and in my readings, because it's one thing to read it or have conversations about it, and it's another thing to actually live it out. And as I'm living it out, I'm hoping that I'm sharing that with the people around me too. So that's kind of really where I'm trying to go with this whole journey.
Yeah, the sauna is definitely a game changer, and the cold plunge. What's funny is that, so I've grown up in Russia, and in the Eastern world in general, we've been doing these cryotherapies since I was a kid. It's like, I mean, but except we would just go into a lake. Like we just go into a lake because it's really cold in Russia. So you just go in the middle of the winter, or like in Finland, when we're very close to Finland, I grew up in St. Petersburg, and that was a normal thing. So today when I go to these cryo things and they're charging ridiculous amount of money, I'm like, how are we, like, people always, I mean, I love that because people always find a way to monetize. And I'm like, this is an ancient practice. Like, you know what I mean? Like we grew up in that, in that world. And I'm just like, so it's, but I'm really happy to see that people are doing it more and more. I love the cold plunges. I was like, my first buy when I get my house is going to be like in the backyard, instead of just like cold showers, like I'm going to have a plunge. Like that's my first purchase. So it's, yeah, so it's definitely, I think there's something to feeling challenged and a little bit of slight self-torture.
I wonder what the next, to your point, like it's something that's so kind of primal and it's been there for so long, and different universes, civilizations. I wonder if they're going to start charging people to like sit around a campfire they build indoors somewhere, because it's again like the same sort of thing. So I wonder what we'll figure out, Elena. We'll figure out what the next kind of trend is, and monetize it for ourselves.
Right? Well, what comes to mind. What's funny is that when we were kids, so in Russia, this is really bad, and Americans who are listening to this are going to be like completely appalled by this and maybe call child services. But in Russia, when we were kids, my mom would just rub either just like a little alcohol, like a little vodka on our chest, when we were sick because it will warm you up, you know. And then when we had toothache, she would just take with a finger and she put like a little bit of cognac, you know, because it just numbs. So, you know, and nothing ever happened to us. Like, you know, nobody's addicted to alcohol in my family, knock on wood, but you know what I'm saying? Like, but that stuff worked because we were so antibiotics. Like in Russia, you don't give antibiotics unless you're dying, you know? So like you just don't give antibiotics. So it's pretty interesting. So I wonder if there's gonna be a version of that, but not in America.
That's how we get the community warning on this episode right here. That's how we get censored.
No, but a lot of cultures did that, you know, back
100. No, I'm
then.
just
You
teasing.
know, yeah,
You're
but
spot
it's
on.
like I still do it. People still do it. I'm sure there's some grandma in Russia somewhere, you know what I mean? So I mean, I'll take that over an antibiotic any day, you know. So I don't know, but we turned out just fine, I hope. I don't know, maybe people will question it, but but anyway, so where do you hope to take your podcast next? Like, what's your kind of like goals for it, or not the goals, but I guess the vision for it, maybe?
Yeah, it's a good question and really something I'm actively thinking about. You know, when I bought the microphone, I didn't really have I didn't put any goals in mind. I just knew that I wanted to start a podcast and start recording. So I reached out to some friends and close peers in my network. And by the time I looked up, I had a couple of episodes ready to go. And there was this whole heap of to-dos and a to-do list that came from buying this microphone and deciding to start recording. So all that's to say, I'm just now kind of turning a corner or getting to the first little mountain, or what do you call it? I guess peak of the mountain of the smaller mountain, but while I look up to see the other massive mountain above. But at this first little, call it plateau, if you will, I'm starting to see like, all right, I kind of am in a rhythm or cadence for recording and getting guests and figuring out sponsorships. But now the next step is figuring out goals and plans and what I want to do with this show. And you know, to answer your question, candidly, I don't quite know what the end all be all is. I'm approaching almost 30 episodes, which is crazy. I've released just about an episode a week since I started recording. And so, you know, I think that as I get closer to the end of the calendar year and New Year's resolutions, I need to really take some time to set some goals. But as you know, as well as anyone, trying to, I mean, it really feels like a business in and of itself. And so trying to set goals while also trying to run the metaphorical business is a little bit more challenging than I anticipated. So long story short, I'm trying to just, you know, enjoy the journey while I'm going through it and really dedicate some time to think through, all right, what's going to be on my vision board for end of this year and into next.
Yeah, just enjoy it. Just keep doing it and just enjoy it. I mean, you're great at it. Just from a guest perspective, like you're just great. You know, you do your homework. You feel comfortable to speak with. So, you know, you bring out stuff. I was telling like the stuff that you brought out in me is like the depth of homework you've done. I said, oh my, like, which is the sales guy that you are naturally. You do your homework well about a person, right? It's you know, I was like, you were asking me questions I don't think I ever shared publicly. So it was I was very impressed as a guest for sure. But I'm curious also, as you're, and so I mean, I think you're gonna be just fine. Just like keep doing what you're doing. But how are you, like, to your point, you said it's hard, like there's so much to think about, so much to do. So how are you balancing all of this now?
Yeah, I get a hard time from friends and family because certain components of my schedule and structure are super rigid in my non-negotiables. And also I'm in the office multiple days a week as well. And so balancing my full-time job with seeing friends and family and staying connected that way and going to the gym and prioritizing physical and mental health as well, I get to a point where I really need to be budgeting my time accordingly. So I've been spending a lot more time on Friday evenings and Sundays on my computer than I ever thought I would. But it's just again, it's just a matter of balancing and knowing that, you know, I have tasks that I want to do. And I think that's the critical component is it doesn't feel like a chore or homework to me. It's exciting and I'm intrinsically motivated to dive into the podcast homework, if you will. I was sitting in bed the other night and I was editing videos on YouTube and I posted a story to my Instagram. I never thought I was going to be editing YouTube videos at 11 at night, but found myself doing that. So that's to say, I mean, I think it's all a matter of finding something that doesn't feel like it's work, because it doesn't really for me. It's just a matter of, there are some pieces of monotony, whether it is little components of as you know, when you're editing a clip or uploading to YouTube and the upload fails or whatever the little nuances that can be a little annoying from time to time. But I really truly enjoy doing it. So that's what keeps me kind of coming back and recording.
Yeah. How do you feel you've changed since you started a podcast? Have you felt that like the conversations you've had? How do you feel? Have you something changed in you? Anything?
Yeah. Again, it's kind of like a flywheel of excitement when I have these conversations. I feel like I don't know if you feel the same way, but when I wrap up an interview, I'm fired up and I'm excited, and I feel like I get an endorphin rush after I'm done with a conversation, more so than on a typical work Zoom call. And I think it's just because you're having conversations, you're stoking the fire with excitement, and at least for what I like to do in my episodes, stoking the fire with positivity and excitement and kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of people talking about having faith and believing that they are where they're supposed to be. And in doing that for 30 minutes to an hour, multiple times a week, you get more excited and more invigorated to come back on and do it again. So all that to say, all that I've learned is that the more time I spend doing it, the more time I enjoy it. And I've also learned that there are certain parts of the process that I'll definitely hope to outsource at a time, like the video editing. I'm not a creative in that nature by any stretch of the imagination. I love the business component of it. So, you know, I've learned a lot just in conversations and hearing people's life stories, like you talked about before we started filming. Hearing people's life stories, while it might sound while it might not seem might seem trivial to you, and just thinking through your own story, it's validating for other people to hear that you've gone through similar things, or someone in a place of success has gone through similar trials and tribulations, because it's, like I said, it's validating. So you know, it's been a super enjoyable process for me so far.
I think we're just naturally, as humans, we're designed to connect, and I think that's what podcasts do. You know, so that's why you feel that rush, and just podcasters in general, like the crowd that does podcasts, whether there's a guest or host, I just in my opinion, just very, like, it's just a different kind of person that wants to have that conversation and put themselves out there. So do you know what I'm saying? So it's I think the type of profile of a person that is willing to do that is also, I don't know, I feel like there's just a specific profile, maybe, at least that's what I've seen. Yeah, so I don't know, but that's kind of my guess, I guess. But I think it's just that we want that connection, you know, and
100%. It's spot on. I mean, look at the best podcasters in the world. It's individuals who make you feel like you're in the room with them when you're listening to the top podcast, whether it's Smartless with the comedians, or the Joe Rogan Experience, or some of the Barstool podcasts, or whatever your podcast is of choice. The reason why you probably like listening to it is because it feels like you're in the room with them, sitting on the couch or sitting across the screen in the same room. And that's my goal. And when I have conversations, and I'm sure it's the same for you. And I think that's really what separates the good from the great, and the great from the superior podcasters, is being able to your point, it's human nature. You want to be included. You want to feel that sense of community. Maybe that's where the indoor campfire site will be the next big wave. My prediction here. I'm just kidding. But all that's to say, I think that it's the human connection component of podcasts is why it's so popular, and probably why they really took off during the pandemic, when people were missing out on that.
And I think doing it in person, because you have a setup where you do some of the stuff in person as well, right? So I think that's brilliant, because you have some in person, right?
Yeah, I've done a couple in person, and it's a totally different experience, especially with someone you've never met in person before. When I've done episodes with my friends who I've known for forever, it's like just very, very natural and normal. But when you're meeting a stranger for the first time, doing it over Zoom versus face to face in person is a very different experience.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I think that's my next step. But I'm curious, like, tell me more, like, how is it different, in what sense?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I feel like in today's age, we're so fortunate that there's no shortage of podcast studios in any major city. And so when I've been in different cities, I've just searched best podcast studios in Miami, or best podcast studios in Chicago, or wherever it is. And there's so many different options. It's just a matter of seeing which one has availability and looks kind of up to par. And so like I said, when I'm talking to someone over Zoom for the first time, there's just little intricacies of whether it's just keeping it more conversational, or interrupting, or even just the little logistics. I know when I'm in person, it's just the microphone is the only thing I need to worry about, and you have the camera, and there's usually an engineer in the room that takes care of all of the audio, video, everything else. So all you need to do is just be there, be present, and interview to the best of your ability or have a conversation to the best of your ability. So it
Yeah.
almost takes a little bit of the worry off the back of your mind of like, oh, what if I wasn't recording? Or what if my audio sounds funky or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Because there's a paid professional taking care of all of that for you.
Yeah.
I think because some of those variables are removed, you're able to be even more present. Even the best podcasters over Zoom, being in the room with someone, you're able to be even more present because some of those worries are just alleviated. But it's really, I mean, it really is a different experience. And again, I think there's a ton of studios in the DC area. And I heard an interesting podcast the other day where someone had this idea of creating a studio on wheels, where you've seen barbershops on wheels or pet grooming on wheels, where you rent out a Sprinter van or a mini truck in the back and put up a studio that could travel from place to place. So
I
I'm
like
sure
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've inspired me. I think I'm going to have to do in-person stuff.
Check it out. There's a lot of cool
I'm going
studios
to.
in the DC area. I'll send them your way.
Yeah, I'll check it out for sure. And then we're going to have to do another one in person. That's what that means.
We had a cliffhanger at the end of our episode together on R4E, so we'll have to tap back in person.
Deal. Where can people find you? Where do you hang out at?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on a handful of different socials. I'm trying to align all of the handles, but I'm on Instagram at Arjan Peters 3. And my Instagram handle for the podcast is R4, the number 4, E pod. And you can find me r4epod@gmail.com. Happy to answer any questions or plug in. But Elena, it was a pleasure to connect with you as always. And I'm excited to keep the conversation going in person, hopefully.
Yeah, well, you're not done yet. I have one more question.
Fire away.
I have one more question. What is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. And I love that was one of the questions that you teed up for us here. I always think about this, and I think this is a new frame of mind that I've had over the last couple of years, but I always think, what's the worst that can happen? Well, I think it was you that said it on our episode together, where you first worked at Subway. You've had a job for so long, like you're going to be able to pay the bills. And might not be able to live to the same standard of living as you'd want to for a little while you're making ends meet, but there's always going to be a job that you can go and get. There's always going to be a support network of friends and family that you can lean back on. There's always going to be another job, another opportunity, another chance. So why not go out and take that leap of faith? Because again, that's what I've learned from my episode so far, is the people that have been successful, and success does not mean exclusively monetary success, but the people that seem to be happiest and the most free that I speak with are individuals that took that leap of faith. So the question is, what's that leap of faith for you, and what's the worst that can happen if you take it?
I love it. Arjan, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you in person soon.
Thanks, Elena. I really appreciate the time. Take care.